Steve here.
And Larson.
And welcome back to Going In Raw Count Out, the only top 10 wrestling show you need to be listening to right here, youtube.com/Steven Larson, and available wherever fine podcasts can be found, Larson.
Yeah.
Anyways, so today on Count Out, we're going to be talking about reboots.
Well, like movie reboots?
Kind of.
Comic book reboots?
Creative reboots when the WWE specifically...
Wrestling. This is a wrestling top 10.
This is a wrestling show. So this is generally we talk about wrestling.
Mentally traveling back in time to 5 or 6 years ago.
Talking
about video games and movie reboots.
Movies.
We probably did reboots.
I know we've done several reboot lists before. But this is about wrestling. We're in the middle of what we've been told is a creative reboot for the WWE.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the specific one that we're in
Maybe.
a moment, but it got us thinking, when else has the WWE had to say, hold on, stop what we're doing. Let's rethink things. Let's head in a new direction.
Hit the reset button
on their product.
Look at something new.
And we found 10 instances.
10
instances of creative reboots. So let's hop right into this, Larson.
Sure, why not?
Number 10.
10.
The New Generation. This is what I call the crap reboot.
Well, hold on. Let's wait. Hold that opinion until we talk about the invasion. This is a New Generation thing, kind of kicked off around 1992, went on till pretty much the birth of the Attitude Era. And the general idea was business was down because people were getting tired of Hogan and all the guys who brought WWF to national prominence in the 80s. And so Vince rolled the dice and decided to focus on younger talent and kind of force some of the older guys out the door, most noticeably Randy Savage. Savage wanted to have like a 2-year-long program with Shawn Michaels to put him over because he was so impressed by him.
Yeah.
Vince said, "No, just do commentary."
Here's the interesting thing about that specifically is that Vince never really, I think, understood that there was a lifespan on the Hulk Hogan thing. And when it became obvious that there was, the torch passing to the Ultimate Warrior just was not. I mean, yeah, for that WrestleMania, what was it, like 6? For that
but the following SummerSlam, the Ultimate Warrior is like, "I'm out of here. You're not paying me enough money." So.
Exactly. Give me $300,000.
And then you had Brett, who, we might not be the Brett's top fans.
We may not appreciate him as much as others, but we understand that he's a guy that if you're going to roll the dice on somebody and you're looking at your roster, that's a good guy.
Yeah, that's a good guy. It's a good guy.
People liked him.
And it is a situation where Vince, if he was fully invested in New Generation, he should have followed it through to the very end.
Well, getting back to this.
And he did. Yeah. And if that's the case, then you got to have that passing of the torch. You got to have Hogan drop the belt to Brett, put him over. You got let Savage do his 2-year run with Shawn Michaels because Savage says, "I will retire after that.
Yeah,
I'm willing to hang him up after this. Just give me this storyline with Shawn Michaels. I'll do whatever you want. I'll get out of the business. Just let me have the storyline because I really like this guy."
Yeah.
Oh, I'm afraid, Randy, we can't do that. Why not?
I need you at commentary.
If you want this new generation of talent to take over for the old guard, you got to have the old guard put him over.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why would the fans care?
Yeah, the New Generation was sort of hampered by multiple things. It was like the perfect storm of bad for the WWE because there was no, number one, it was a complete misfire not having Hogan completely put Bret over. Apparently Hogan didn't want to. According to Bret Hart.
Shocking.
Yeah, right. Completely shocking. So the path went like this for the New Generation, right? So Flair won the title, dropped it to Bret Hart. Not on a pay-per-view, Larson. Not on a TV show.
It was for Coliseum home video.
It was you could only see it on a VHS cassette tape.
They're really pushing that VHS business.
What kind of passing of the torch? Because Ric Flair, that would be even Ric Flair, that would be a decent passing of the torch. I mean, it's better.
It would be from one generation to the other, but when it comes to WWF, you really need Hogan to be the guy who do it. You need Hogan.
Or even Savage, somebody.
At least Savage was willing.
But you need Hogan. But they did it off TV. So all of a sudden, Bret Hart shows up, and he's champion. Okay, there we are. That was in 92. In 93 at WrestleMania 9, he had his match against Yokozuna, big, nasty heel, right? And so in the main event, what did we get? Do we get Bret Hart conquering that nasty heel and retaining his championship? No. Yokozuna won. And then Hulk Hogan comes stumbling down the aisle.
Well, because Yokozuna cheated to win. Hogan comes down, I guess, in theory, to right the wrong that had just occurred, and then find a solution to this injustice. And his solution was having a match with Yokozuna and win the title himself.
In like, what was it, 16
Yeah,
seconds
like
or
a total
something,
squash.
something ridiculous like that.
But everybody was tired of Hogan at that point, so by the time King of the Ring came back around in June, Hogan dropped the belt to Yokozuna, and he was out the door.
Well, and according to Bret Hart, Vince wanted Hogan to drop the title to Bret Hart at SummerSlam, 2 months later?
Yeah.
But Hogan said, "Yeah, no, I'll drop it to Yokozuna. He's a big guy. He's believable. I'm just gonna do that." But of course, it's not gonna be clean because God forbid, put like a monster heel over, give him the rub so that whenever anybody beats him, Bret Hart or even maybe Lex Luger. Anybody beats him, they
funny.
get that rub.
Yeah.
Right? No, it had to be via...
Was it exploding flashbulb?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exploding
The
flashbulb.
smallest crowd of the time for a pay-per-view.
Yeah, it was like 6,000, 5,000,
Yeah, it was a really
something
small
like that.
crowd.
So Hogan goes on his merry way. Nobody really cared about him. Anyways,
He was shooting some TV show.
Yokozuna has that belt. He carries it until WrestleMania 10.
where Brett finally gets it from him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So...
And then this era is often maligned because there's a lot of terrible gimmicks. The wrestling wasn't great.
Yeah, Vince was rolling heavy with guys like Doink, like these cartoonish gimmicks.
Well, that's where you saw like Doink. You mentioned
Repo Man,
Duke the Dumpster Drosy.
even like a supreme talent like Scott Hall. And Grant, I know a lot of people like the Razor Ramon thing, but I just kind of feel like the Razor Ramon thing was unnecessary. Like he had that accent.
Yeah.
And like, conversely, when he went over to WCW, they went with granted, they tried to go with the Razor Ramon, but they couldn't because they got sued.
Because legal stuff.
But they ended up just doing Scott. I think Scott Hall just himself is like much more interesting
is completely charismatic.
than like a Scarface thing.
Razor Ramon is pretty much just Scott Hall with an accent.
Yeah, basically. So you had guys like Razor Ramon. He had a guy named after a truck, Diesel, who was champion for a year. And granted, we both like Kevin Nash a lot. And even Kevin Nash has said nobody was really drawing at the time. And I wonder if some of that had to do with the stink of the steroid trial.
Could be.
Because there might have been some stain on the reputation of the WWF. All of a sudden, they were on, talk shows talking about steroids. It was big in the news, steroids. Vince was facing 8 years in jail plus like a $500,000 fine. And he beat that particular rap. But the damage might have been done to the WWF at the time. So even if they had with that roster, granted there was some talent in that roster.
Oh, yeah.
The creative was crap, reputation sort of damage done. New generation really, like you said, is a bit maligned in the minds of pro wrestling fans.
It was a weird kind of transitional period between like the wholesome relatively family-friendly stuff they were doing in the mid-'80s and onward, kind of in between that and the Attitude Era, where the focus was on the youth in the company. However, they didn't adjust the booking of the company to highlight the younger talents. Yeah. They kind of went onward with the same kind of ethos in terms of booking and character, while just focusing on a new generation of talent, I guess, without actually thinking, okay, there's these new talents, the attitudes of the day, the zeitgeist, if you will, is different. Let's try to capture that with this new batch of talent. They didn't bother trying that. It's just still cartoonish gimmicks, pretty much.
Because look at what was going on.
And kind of generally boring wrestling.
Look at what was going on in pop culture at the time. You had Tarantino movies. You had grunge music. You had gangster rap and stuff like that. You had like this sort of groundswell of like, I don't know, a more gritty approach just to pop culture.
Yeah, there was a lot more angst.
There was angst. There was more realism. There was, and so
it took WWE about
4 more years.
Well, 6 years, I guess.
Yeah,
to really capitalize on it.
And on top of that, like because the Attitude Era, A, was such a 180, B, was so wildly successful, that also puts a spotlight on just how low the new generation really was. Even though, like we've said, there is some fantastic talent here.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people loved, obviously, HBK.
Oh, best ever.
Bret Hart. And then
yeah, Bret's okay.
Yeah. Moving on. But yeah, we're going to talk a lot about the Attitude Era.
Yes.
Much later in the
Yes,
show.
yes.
Number 9. The McMahon shakeup.
The jury's still out on whether anything's going to really change. I mean, so far the only thing I've noticed that the Revival was able to do
what you're
the
looking
Revival
at,
thing on TV, and then Almas is on TV more often.
So if you're looking at the screen, if you're watching this on YouTube, then you see this might be the extent of what's actually being shaken up.
Yeah,
we see more McMahons.
Yeah,
and they're all in a concentrated.
Yeah, but let's revisit this moment. We were at this episode of Raw where the McMahon family came out and said, essentially, we're sorry. Raw has been terrible of late.
Yeah.
We're going to enter a new era where we listen to you.
Mind you.
You are the authority now, you being the WWE Universe.
Mind you, it took historically low ratings for them to realize this.
Yes.
It's not people whining. And granted, I know that, you can't really necessarily go off of, Twitter feeds and wrestling Twitter and Reddit
you can't.
and stuff.
You got to have, because what's the one thing, probably more than anything, we knock Vince for? Lack of vision. Mm-hmm. You got to have a vision of where you want to take your product.
Right.
And not to say your vision can't be adjusted based on what's working, what's not, what fans are accepting, what they're not. But at the end of the day, if you have a vision, you have to, I think, unless this turns out to be an absolute disaster, you have to try to see it through.
Yeah, exactly. So they come out and they say, we're listening to you now. Now you're the authority, which I still think was kind of a miss.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure you should be referencing something that everybody...
be delegating authority to 2.5 million people either. That's going to make it
that,
difficult to
if
do
you want
anything.
to take it literally.
Yes.
And so they said you're going to see new faces, new matchups, and it's going to happen over the following weeks and months. This coming Monday is the first sort of non-holiday episode.
Yeah.
We're out of the holiday spectrum since this happened.
I can't remember if it's Raw or SmackDown. One of them is coming from Orlando this weekend, I believe. So you can expect to see the first,
I would think, yeah,
NXT call-ups, I would suspect, this week in advance of the Rumble. Mm-hmm. And it's probably unfair to judge this shakeup after 2 weeks when it happened over 2 consecutive holiday weekends.
There's some subtle changes.
Like I mentioned, we saw the Revival on TV wrestle a nearly NXT quality match against Rude and Gable. Almas has been on TV a ton. Mustafa Ali, whether it was planned before the shakeup or not, is a full-time member of the SmackDown roster. Is getting a really solid push.
And a good reaction, too.
Yes, all great things.
Yeah.
All great things. The overall creative on Raw thus far over the last 3 weeks has not changed a lick. I don't think the quality of creative on Raw has really changed dramatically one way or the other.
Here's the thing about that, though. I honestly believe it's they are in such a hole with each of the members that are in prominent positions. You take the top 6 people in the men's division, the top 5 people in the women's division, you take the top tag teams. They have been in such a creative hole over the past 6 months that it will take so much time for our perceptions to change to judge whether or not creative is going to change. They cannot smash the change immediately. I don't think you can judge it right now.
Well, I just said that, yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I thought you said it hasn't changed a lick.
No, I said it's probably too soon to judge because it's only been 3 weeks over 2 holiday weekends. But thus far, what we've seen hasn't changed.
I think there's been changes.
Subtle, nothing huge. The 2 huge changes is suddenly trying to book Seth Rollins and AJ Styles like Becky Lynch.
Well, it's a pivot. I mean, it's a change in attitude. I mean, that's a bit of a cynical way to put it, I think. But maybe it's true. Maybe they are saying, oh, well, it worked over here, we're going to do it over here. I think the Seth Rollins thing was just, hey, let's try to get some motivation into this guy. And
Dean Ambrose isn't bringing any intensity to this feud.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, let's fire him up a little bit. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being overly optimistic. Maybe you're being overly pessimistic, and we have to meet somewhere in the middle to find the actual, what's actually happening here. But I don't know. I think I've seen some changes. I don't think it's fair to say that there hasn't been a lick of creative change.
There hasn't been a ton either.
I mean, we've seen how the tag division with the Revival. We've seen that they actually
it was
put
a
on
match.
They put on.
Yeah, I mentioned that too.
Well, there was the number 1 contender match before that.
Yeah,
that was a decent match as
well. It was decent.
So I mean, you have that. You have the announcement of the women tag titles. Mm-hmm. That's good stuff.
It's good.
So there's been.
But the packaging
Apollo
of the
Crews.
That was cool. The packaging of the announcement of the women tag titles was cheesy Vince though.
Yeah, that wasn't good.
No.
That wasn't good. But I'm not going to say there hasn't been any changes. There have been changes.
So.
Let's see here. Next. Number 8.
8.
The PG era.
Is
Is this part of the PG era?
Yeah, that's
right
Rumble.
here?
That's Rumble 2008. That's the prelude.
No, the PG era.
Let me
didn't
finish.
Start
The
until
prelude
late.
to the PG era, but who embodied the PG era more than anybody else?
This guy right here,
John
John Cena. Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. That's why I didn't change it. Still, I kept it on there.
It's a good
But
picture of John Cena.
Here's the
It's
thing.
a huge return at the Rumble that year.
Here's the thing. I know you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But we're gonna get comments. Oh, that was before the PG era. PG era happened technically July 22nd, 2008.
Yeah.
Is when the first episode of SmackDown had a PG rating to it. WWE decided, hey,
No more blood.
This ruthless aggression era, nothing but bloodbath matches.
Yeah.
Tons.
That's really what it
and
turned
tons
out
of
to
blood.
be.
Kind of interesting too is that 2 days later at SummerSlam, I'm sorry, the Great American Bash.
2 days prior, yeah.
Is when HBK and Chris Jericho had an absolute bloodbath of a match, and McMahon said, "Okay, yeah, we're not doing that anymore."
Well,
it didn't take Eddie Guerrero passing out, mind you,
He went to shock backstage, man.
years earlier.
Yeah, HBK bled a ton in that match.
Yeah, it took that. And then they decided, hey, you know what? We're going to try to we're going to hardcore go after that family dollar, see if we can make $1.01 more in this business.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't really fault them for that. 10 years later, they're making money hand
Tons
over
of money.
fist, largely because these things are known as big family affairs now.
Here's another thing, though, too. These eras, we can pinpoint the exact date when SmackDown had a PG rating. There's a prelude to all these things.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Without the assent of John Cena, who knows if the PG era would have happened as it did? Because he was the perfect superstar to package the PG era around.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that was probably the defining moment of his early career, was coming back from the Rumble that early after tearing his pec.
Sure.
Surprise entrant number 30, winning the Rumble.
Kind of interesting you mentioned that because we've talked before about a pivot that we'll see a little bit later on here, the rock and wrestling era, the Hogan era, and what would that have looked like without Hulk Hogan? Would it have been as successful as it was? I kind of think that probably not. The new generation had good names. There wasn't that one defining.
Well, because there
guy.
wasn't the one guy who captured the zeitgeist of the time like Hogan did in the mid-'80s.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or like Stone Cold did in the Attitude Era.
Right.
Or
exactly.
Cena did during the PG era.
And the new generation was missing that one over-the-top guy who, exactly like you said, captured the zeitgeist.
And I think that guy might have been on the roster. They just adjusted nothing in terms of how they approach creative, given the changing of the times. It was like, okay, well, no one really cares about Hulk Hogan anymore. Hulkamania is passé at this point. Well, let's just repackage Lex Luger as kind of the next Hulk Hogan. That was their attitude. I was like, okay, let's take a look at pop culture for right now at the time being, and how do we fit in there? How can we capture what's going on in pop culture and reflect that in our wrestling programming?
Getting back to the new generation, out of all those guys, who had the most pure natural charisma?
Scott Hall.
Scott Hall. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine if they didn't go with the goofy accent?
Mm-hmm.
If you let Scott Hall be Scott Hall, and also, what has Scott Hall said about his desire to have the championship gold?
Doesn't care about it.
Didn't care. What do we know about Hogan, Austin, and Cena? They all gave a damn about.
Oh, HBK too.
I will have that belt. But HBK didn't have the natural. If Scott Hall had the natural charisma, I'm sorry, if he had the desire to backstage politic and be a real
a shark.
I was
Yes.
going to say snake, but you have to kind of be a snake too. If he had the desire to be a shark, he could have been that one guy who really captured that new generation and had been that guy, because that dude was all charisma. And talk about somebody perfect for the 90s,
well, also
which was a gritty thing.
Yeah, and he was a fairly underappreciated worker too.
Sure,
he could put on really good matches.
Absolutely. I mean, look at that WrestleMania ladder match.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, getting back to the PG era, what do you think is more maligned, the new generation or the PG era?
No, new generation.
You think so?
Oh yeah.
You're probably right about that.
I think the only reason people look down the PG era is because they look so fondly upon the Attitude Era.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
But if you watch a lot of the Attitude Era stuff, it doesn't age well.
Yeah, but dude, the PG era, I mean, you want to talk about the time when I dropped out of watching, and I know you did too. Like, once you started getting into it, was just, I mean, I can't speak for the new generation because I wasn't watching at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But when the PG era came around, I would just sit there watching. I was like, this is boring. Nobody's doing anything fun.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, because it was post. Yeah, nobody was doing anything fun at that point.
It wasn't until CM Punk started doing the Summer of Punk stuff and things started getting a little bit interesting.
Yeah.
Which takes us to our next era, Steve. Why don't you?
Number 7.
7.
The Reality Era.
This was so dubbed by Triple H during an episode of Raw. I believe it was March 24th, 2014, lead up to WrestleMania 30, where he's out in the ring and he's complaining about how the fans today are so apathetic, as opposed to when he was, on his reign of terror. He'd look out in the crowd and see people whose ambitions were the same as his, who were hungry, who were sharks.
Invested.
And now he doesn't see that. He sees a bunch of people on their phone on Twitter complaining about stuff. And he says, how about we just dub this the Reality Era? Mm-hmm. Speaking of the things having their roots go back further than when the kind of definition of the era is, CM Punk, the pipe bomb, where he kind of pulled the curtain back a little bit and acknowledged, the stuff that happens backstage is a lot different than how it's presented here on television.
Yeah. Well, the Reality Era was, we talk about these reboots that sort of come out of necessity. CM Punk was one of those guys who kind of, by virtue of the pipe bomb, which granted, yes, was obviously it was not a shoot. It was a work. They went over it beforehand. But because that went over so well, they were forced to acknowledge, man, the people really responded to this guy. And that was taken up a notch by Daniel Bryan as well.
Yeah.
When they brought in Batista to fight Randy Orton for the title at WrestleMania, and the fans basically forced the hand of the WWE. They were forced into sort of changing course and putting that title on Daniel Bryan.
Because the fans wished it.
So you have, the reality sort of, it's the curtain has sort of been drawn back a bit. That's where the reality
we've
term
seen the
comes
proliferation
from.
of wrestling news sites. When we were in college during the Attitude Era, it was Scoops, and wrestling was around then, and there was a couple other resources. It's blown up in the last few years. This is when like Facebook, Twitter, that type of social media,
Twitter became a thing.
Really blew
Reddit,
up.
Yeah, exactly.
Reddit blew up. So we had a lot more people talking a lot more about wrestling, and it seemed like wrestling fans knew a lot more of what was going on behind the scenes than probably ever before at that point.
Yeah. As much as the WWE would love to deny all that kind of stuff,
it's hard to do that.
It's exactly. And so, the curtain's pulled back. You see what's really going on, and the fans were able to affect what was happening on the screen. And that has its roots back in CM Punk with that pipe bomb, where he's essentially, breaking the fourth wall, and he's talking about stuff going on behind the scenes. Yep. And then Daniel Bryan kind of epitomized that. Yeah. The fans literally.
The Yes Movement.
Yeah, bringing him to championship gold. So, kind of a weird sort of didn't last very long in terms of being an
kind of
era.
Ill-defined.
Yeah, right.
Because apart from that one moment, there's some. And it's really when they started pushing Lesnar as this unbeatable force. And granted, he was still a couple years removed from his UFC run. But it seemed like they really wanted to establish him as a legitimate presence. Because this is when he ended the Undertaker streak. Yeah, that same WrestleMania that Daniel Bryan won the WWE title.
And then what was it?
And then the following SummerSlam, he annihilated Cena,
which
the title.
Kind of felt like a grab. And I know, granted, Vince has always been about, even before social media was a thing, the big buzzworthy moment. Austin turning heel. Austin literally. I was reading up on, I think it was the Invasion thing. At WrestleMania 17, Vince didn't have a big idea. He didn't have the big moment. And so Austin pitched him, hey, why don't I become a heel? Terrible idea. And so the Lesnar-Cena thing seemed to be, let's get people on social media talking. Yeah. Let's get everybody talking about
the nature of the destruction, yes, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think they wanted to...
Oh, yeah. Just, what was it, 16 suplexes or whatever it was.
But then they wanted to build up Lesnar, I'm assuming, too, so when Reigns eventually vanquished him, it'd be a massive passing the torch for Reigns. But it's ironic that Reigns began his ascent up the card during the same reality era, where the fans tried to exercise their right to cheer or boo whom they like in an effort, in Reigns' case, to boo him out of the building every chance they got, and yet his push continued.
Yeah.
And it seems like they at moments would address it and kind of pump the brakes on a little bit, but you always get the sense that ultimately he was going to be back in the main event.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting, the parallels between the reality era and then the sort of the McMahon shakeup thing, because, you know, WWE has a ton of money right now, but the ratings thing really, they cannot, you can't, you judge your product by your ratings, you know? I mean, in terms of the enthusiasm.
It's ratings, it's attendance, all that kind of stuff.
All that kind of stuff, exactly. And it's kind of interesting that they're coming out and saying, we're listening to you, whereas back with Daniel Bryan, they put their money where their mouth was, you know? Triple H came out as a heel and dropped a promo about, oh, you're the fans. But behind the scenes, it was like, okay, man, these people, we have to listen to them because they are going to revolt. They're going to they took over the Rumble when Rey Mysterio came out at number 30 instead of Daniel Bryan.
Yeah.
And Batista came out earlier.
Yeah, like 27 or 28,
Yeah, and it's like, oh, you know. And so now we'll see if they actually do listen to the fans. I mean, regardless of what, you know, people want, people are unsatisfied. People are not happy with the product. And so, well, with Raw specifically. And so, you know, that's
where Raw goes, SmackDown goes too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, weird thing. Number 6. The Invasion.
Oh dear.
So,
you know, I'll read up on the twists and turns of the Invasion, and it gives me a headache because it's so ill-conceived. They had no obvious plan of where this was going.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. As of WrestleMania 17, which obviously took place early April of 2001, the Attitude Era was still, I mean, it was going pretty strong.
Yeah.
They were still building really great guys like Kurt Angle. When we talk about the perfect sort of, you know, successor for the Attitude Era, he was doing great.
That's when Triple H was getting to the main event scene too.
Triple H was in the main event scene. Rock was still hot. Austin was still hot. Then they pulled the trigger on that heel turn. And on top of that, you have all of a sudden in March, I think it was late March, they bought WCW.
Yep.
Which, you know, at that point, by 2001, WWF was firing on all cylinders so much that they had buried WCW. Yeah. WCW was losing money hand over fist. Yep. WWF was hot. They were doing great. And then maybe the worst thing that could have happened. They bought WCW. They literally bought their competition. I'll never forget turning on internet back then and us looking at like the preview screen because of the East Coast stuff was already going down. And there was that split screen of McMahon and Shane. And so Shane and Stephanie had bought WCW, or Shane had.
Yeah.
And then I guess Stephanie bought ECW. Is that right? So they brought that into the fold.
So rather, I mean, they were trying to recreate the Monday Night Wars with WWF going against WCW and ECW as one combined force.
And if you read, so I enjoy right now, Meltzer has been releasing on a week-to-week basis the vintage observers online.
Yeah.
That sort of have been taking place around the same time. And the plan, of course, was to make WCW its own competitor, or its own thing, obviously owned by WWE, but they were going to get their own TV time slot, and they couldn't find the right slot. There was pushback from I guess USA Network at the time, or was it TNN at that point?
I think it was TNN.
I think it was TNN as well. So there was pushback there, and then of course there was that infamous match between Buff Bagwell and Booker T that just stunk the place. So they had, okay, we're gonna brand the last hour or whatever, Monday Night Raw, WCW. So they had that new terrible logo that they made, and then the main event was Buff Bagwell versus Booker T, and it was just a stinker of a match. And the fans were like, "This is garbage. You guys have been telling us that we need to hate WCW," and then they put on this crap match, and I mean. I do remember the crowd giving a good reception to the cruiserweight stuff. They really liked Billy Kidman because he was like one of those RVD guys. It's like, man, this guy's doing really cool stuff in WCW, so we're kind of excited to see him here in WWF.
Yeah.
And so, but it was interesting behind the scenes. It was all like, okay, we're going to put WCW on its own thing, and that just didn't happen
also,
because they couldn't get it to happen.
They couldn't get it to happen. Also, what didn't help things is they couldn't get any of the marquee names from WCW.
That was the
they
biggest
were all
thing, yeah.
sitting on their Turner contracts.
Yeah.
And why would they accept a buyout for cents on the dollar where they can just sit in those contracts for a couple of years and collect the money?
That was the biggest thing, man. There was no Goldberg, no Flair, no NWO, no Hogan, no Hall, no Nash.
No Rey Mysterio.
No Sting. No Mysterio.
No
and
Steiner.
So you're left with guys like Mike Awesome, and Lance Storm, who I love Lance Storm, but he's not a big marquee name. And then, I mean, Booker T, he was like, okay, yeah, I'll go do that.
DDP,
no Steiner.
But DDP was there.
DDP was there.
Which they botched that horribly.
That was one of the worst botches right there. And so even the guys that they did bring in, with the exception of Booker T, they just mishandled completely. Like Booker T, they actually treated pretty well.
Yeah.
And so, by nature of them winning the Monday Night Wars, they sort of said, okay, we've got WCW. Now we have to move away from the Attitude Era and let's see what we can do with this.
Yeah.
And it just turned into this big debacle. It was just this giant creative mess, which ended up giving WWE over 200, almost 200 active competitors on their roster.
That's crazy.
By the time all was said and done, they had their two only competitors, WCW and ECW, and they had zero idea
what to do with everybody.
They had guys like, Stone Cold. He was a heel, so he went to the Alliance, which didn't make a lick of sense because WCW he got fired from them via FedEx
by Eric Bischoff. Yeah,
right. So that didn't make any sense. It all culminated at Survivor Series 2001. Where Kurt Angle, who had been part of the Alliance, ended up being a mole for WWE, helped Vince get the win there. And then the next night, Stone Cold was back to being a face, attacking Vince. Kurt was a heel.
Flair came out.
They finally got Flair after all that was said and done. They had Flair finally.
Yep.
And so, if they had simply waited, if they simply bought WCW, waited a year, they were still hot. They still could have been running angles with Austin and Rock and
Triple H
and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then, then you could have waited a year, waited some of these contracts out. You get Hogan, Hall, Nash,
Flair, Goldberg.
I mean,
Steiner. Yeah.
If you look at 2003, by the time 2003 had rolled around, you had all those guys.
I know.
You had them all.
I know.
And so, it was just a big mess. Soon after that, they I think it was in March of 2002, because we're going to talk about the first brand split here also, right? So in March of 2002, they announced that they were going to be splitting the brands between Raw and SmackDown, and they were going to do it via a draft.
Yes.
So it was sort of a continuation of, we have all these people. It was going to be WCW and WWF, but now it's going to be WWF, and WWF's going to be Raw.
Yeah, and SmackDown. Which eventually, it was late 2001 where they had the Undisputed Championship decided, won by Chris Jericho. And then a matter of 8 months later, they split the titles again.
Yeah.
So each brand had their own belt.
Right. They kept it. And that lasted a while. The brand split. I think it was 2000 and... When did they start doing the Raw Super shows?
It was 2011, 2012.
Yeah, it was... Okay, yeah. So that lasted a good long while for those to be split. And for a spell, SmackDown creatively
was the A show.
And I mean, not just creatively, but ratings wise also under Paul Heyman.
Yeah.
It was the A show. Unfortunately, it didn't last that long.
Nope.
But yeah, there was some interesting stuff going on there. So that was a pretty huge change for the WWE, which leads us to number 5. The brand split 2016.
So this is after they've been doing these Raw, SmackDown, Super shows for a few years, and
if you're watching this on YouTube, look at Seth Rollins' face, and R-Truth's face
staring at Finn Balor. This is the Raw after the draft when Finn Balor shows up.
What a superstar!
Oh, I know.
Look at that's a superstar
because he walks out from behind everybody forward,
and he's not doing that goofy smile either.
No.
Anyways,
that was a heck of a night.
That was a great night.
That was a star-making night for one Finn Balor.
Yeah.
So after years of doing the Raw, SmackDown, Super shows and really just treating SmackDown like a recap show, they decide, all right, let's split the brand. We're going to move SmackDown Tuesday night, start airing it live. and we're going to kind of reshuffle the deck here. They had a brand split, which was announced in May. The following July, I believe, they had the draft leading up to SummerSlam. SmackDown got the WWE Championship, who Dean Ambrose was holding at the time. And then they created a new belt, debuted at SummerSlam 2016 for Raw's top title, Universal Championship. Seth Rollins and Finn Balor wrestled for it. Finn Balor, first Universal Champion, however, injured during the match.
I kind of wonder if I don't remember reading the newsletter or like the reason for the brand split, if it was specifically because they understood that live TV rights were becoming
That's probably part of it, yeah.
big profitable thing, and now they'll have 2 live TV shows with their own rosters that they can then sell, which we saw this year. I'm sorry, just last year, 2018, when they sold each Raw and SmackDown off
To different networks.
for a massive, massive amount of money.
Yep.
So I mean what a really amazing move, financially speaking, and I mean creatively speaking. I think it's worked out. I mean, you can't have,
except for recently.
They have. Well, I mean, look. Here's the thing, though. It's not as if Raw's doing crappy. So what else are we going to watch? Raw's doing crappy. We have SmackDown.
Fantastic.
Exactly.
NXT.
I don't think there's actually been
great,
a period. Oh yeah. I don't think there's been a period when both of them, since the brand split, when both of them had been really bad.
When SmackDown wasn't very good. I remember
Raw was pretty good.
Yeah,
it
I
was
guess
Braun
so.
Roman at the time.
Yeah, that's true.
And their women's division was pretty good.
Yeah, because when SmackDown was focusing on Owens and Shane and Daniel Bryan, it was not good.
But at the time Raw was good.
Yeah, it was better.
It's an odd thing. They can't seem to fire on all cylinders.
No, for both shows. I know, it's strange.
So yeah, they also call this the new era, which is kind of silly because 20 years from now they're not going to go back and refer to it as the new era.
No, the new era is whatever the latest era is.
At that point, it's going to be the
just
new
what the
era.
latest era is.
Raw saw graphics package change to their current logo.
The Divas Championship was discarded in favor of a women's championship.
It really, this was really it had been brewing for a couple of years. It started in NXT, the ascent of the 4 horsewomen,
the Women's Revolution.
The Women's Revolution, exactly. And so that sort of cemented the, sort of the new way they're approaching women's wrestling as well. So, yeah, and then they kept the rosters they kept the rosters separate for a year. The next Mania, they did a SHAKEUP.
Yeah, where a couple people got traded, and they had a couple call-ups, and that's kind of been the norm going forward, where after usually Mania and SummerSlam, there'll be a couple talents traded, a couple call-ups.
Was it? Yeah, this was the
SHAKEUP. The SHAKEUP
draft,
saw the SHAKEUP after this at WrestleMania. After WrestleMania 33, saw Nakamura's call up.
Bobby Roode. Was it Roode? No, Roode, because Roode was champion at that point.
Yeah. So no, it wasn't. Nakamura, Ty Dillinger.
It became kind of an annual tradition at that point for the post-Mania
to get a couple call-ups.
Yeah.
Call-ups and a couple trades.
2017 must have been Roode then. Oh, no, the next one.
I think it was after SummerSlam. Yeah, it was after SummerSlam.
Okay.
Because he dropped the belt to Drew. Mm-hmm. And then dithered away. From NXT.
Vince did this.
Yep.
So, yeah, we're still living in new era.
Well, no, we're in McMahon SHAKEUP era.
Oh, now we're in McMahon SHAKEUP era. That's right. It remains
to be seen if anything's actually going to change.
If it's going to be an actual era.
Yeah.
We'll find out. Number 4. This is my favorite one. The BRUNO STAYCATION era. Larson, what do you do if your champion of 8 years is just tired of it?
Yeah, you ask for a break.
He's your meal ticket, though. He is the guy who's selling out Madison Square Garden monthly on not just Saturdays, but Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. More people are coming in, handing you cash money, hand over fist.
Yeah.
And BRUNO says, hey, listen to me now. I don't want to be champion anymore. I'm tired of this. Wait, hold on. You've been champion 8 years. You're tired of it now? Yeah, I want to go home. What are we going to do?
You give Ivan Koloff a call and say, we need someone to hold this belt for a couple weeks.
Was it a couple weeks?
It was 21 days.
Are you serious? I thought it was like 3 months.
Nope, 21 days.
21 days?
So it was on January 17th, 1971, where BRUNO, after being champ for nearly 8 years, dropped the title to Ivan Koloff to a stunned crowd at Madison Square Garden. He held that belt for 3 weeks before losing it to Pedro Morales, who wanted to have a reign of like 1,000 days.
It's so sad that I don't believe there's any audio of that.
Well, I mean, apparently everything was silent. No one said anything.
Okay, you know what I'm talking about.
Bruno thought he damaged his ears. He was so quiet in there.
Yeah.
So I mean, I can play you audio from it. Hold on, listen.
Okay. I'm sure there's one.
There you go.
Hey, great if just one guy belted out. What the f*** this shit? I'm gonna bleep it.
We can't bleep it. You got to cut it out because YouTube knows.
Can I do the backwards thing?
If you want to.
I'll do the backwards thing.
So anyways, Bruno seemingly went home to rest up, and then he got a call from Vince Sr. In 1972 asking him to return. Bruno said, "No, I'm good," until he negotiated himself a plum schedule, which would only see him work large arena shows. He had a bit of a feud with Pedro Morales before recapturing the WWF title from Stan Stasiak December 10th, 1973, about 2 years later, or more than 2 years after he initially dropped it, and then held the belt for another 3.5 years, basically, before dropping it to Superstar Billy Graham again, because his body was having trouble handling the schedule that he had to hold as champion.
Yeah, I mean, you've heard his like that particular schedule. Was it like
7 days a week, twice on Sunday?
Yeah. Man, oh man, it's amazing. I mean, he just passed away this past year, 2018, I think. Right? Was his last year?
I think so.
Or was it the year before
2017?
that?
Maybe
2017. I mean, that dude kept in shape even later in life. That dude was in shape.
Yep. 2018, yeah. April 18th.
And of course, it was pre-steroids. That dude was all natural.
I'm
pretty sure. I think he was like a big anti-steroid guy. So yeah, that's kind of crazy. Speaking of going back to the crowd situation, did you ever read up on how the crowd responded to when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated at Ford's Theater?
No.
Apparently, people were so distraught that one guy shouted out, "We should burn this theater down." Sort of an odd response to trauma such as that.
Yeah.
Old-timey people are just super dramatic and weird, I feel.
That's interesting.
I mean, I don't think there was a lot of access to like mental health care back then. So people are just all weird and messed up. They'd shout stuff like that.
I mean, was it the theater's fault?
You'd have to ask crazy guy from the old-timey days, man.
I mean, if it's a situation where it's such a
traumatic... the answer is no.
No, I know. But, I mean, I guess I'm trying to make sense of it. The only thing I can think of is maybe he thought this is such a traumatic experience. This place is like this place should stand because of what happened here.
It's also a crime scene, though. You need to maintain that for forensics and stuff.
Exactly.
So I don't know what that guy was thinking.
But I mean, like if you just want to, the Ford Theater apparently, it's a terrible place because the president was assassinated there. Well, don't burn it down. Just close the doors.
Yeah, sure.
And in a very structured manner, which won't cause damage to nearby buildings. Tear it down, build something up, build something in its place. That's a rational way to do it.
Yeah, right. You know that place is flammable as heck, too.
Well, then it's like I've been to downtown D.C. Haven't been to inside the Ford Theater, but I've been to the area. There's buildings right next to it. If you burn that place down, the whole block's on fire. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that guy was a mess. I think I read there was that book. I think it's called like Manhunt.
Manhunt, yeah.
Yeah, I think I was listening to the audio version.
Yeah, it's a good book.
Yeah, it is. It's really good. That's where I got that from.
I've read it, but I didn't remember that part.
People are weird, man. Anyway, so yeah, Bruno, he had his vacation. They had to pivot, but it was they only pivoted for like a
couple
while.
Of years, yeah.
And then they put it back on him for 3.5 years. So yeah, and then didn't they like roll with like Larry Zbyszko?
Oh, Superstar Billy Graham.
Oh yeah,
he was in a feud with Zbyszko, but I don't think Zbyszko ever won the title.
Never had the title.
No.
Yeah,
no, because it was Superstar Billy Graham that eventually Backlund got it.
We should do a list on top 10 superstars who became superstars by stumbling in somebody's backyard.
Well, Zbyszko be number one by a mile.
I wonder if there are. Can we do 10 of those? Are there 10 of them?
Unless there's.
Did Finn Balor stumble upon?
Doubtful. I think he probably just went to like some sort of training facility and paid his money and said, "I want to train here." 1 through 10 would probably be Larry Zbyszko.
I think they would be. Number 3.
3.
The Ruthless Aggression era.
It's John Cena.
There's one. That's John Cena right there. He has ruthless. Let me ask you. Do you have ruthless aggression?
You've known me for a long time. I think you know the answer to that question.
You have aggression. I'm not sure if it's ruthless though.
I don't know if it is.
Do I have ruthless? No.
No.
I'm not ruthless, and I'm not very aggressive.
No.
Not unless you get between me and a cheeseburger.
Yeah, maybe.
Holy moly.
Or if you pass gas near you while you're making a cheeseburger.
Oh, that's
then
the
you'll
big
be
one.
ruthless.
Yeah, so you've seen my ruthless aggression.
Yeah,
right
but even that, it's not
It's
that
more
terrifying.
passive aggression.
Yeah, it's not that terrifying. I wasn't fearing for my life by any stretch of the imagination.
So Vince McMahon decided to usher in a new era by coming out and saying the words ruthless aggression a lot. June 2002, the brand split was complete. Vince was like, well, what do I do now? Attitude Era is done with. Stone Cold, he's basically on his way out. He was burnt out.
Rock being wooed by Hollywood.
Yeah, big time. So he came out on Raw. He had all the wrestlers there on the Raw brand come out and stand on the apron and gather around him. He basically had a managerial stand-up meeting live for millions around the world to watch.
Yeah.
It was kind of goofy, and he was sort of throwing out a challenge. Who has got ruthless aggression?
Just yelled that in everybody's face.
And he would just yell that. And then they would awkwardly, without a mic, start. Like, I think Bubba Ray was like, yeah, me. I do. I have, what did you say? Ruthless aggression? Yeah, I have that, sure.
Sure, I'll be ruthlessly aggressive.
It was like a weird brass ring thing.
Kind of.
I think McMahon just realized that people at that point, because there were so many of them, they just wanted to keep their jobs. So they didn't really care about being sharks.
We'll be ruthlessly aggressive.
Here's the thing. There's no leverage for these wrestlers at this point. There's no ECW. There's no WCW.
There's only Ring of Honor, which is just kind of starting out.
Which, yeah.
Well, there's Impact or
and
TNA.
It's funny because Meltzer, when he was talking about All Elite Wrestling, when he was talking about early Ring of Honor, he said nobody there was making a living.
Yeah.
Like Daniel Bryan wasn't making a living.
Smo Joe was doing mortgages at the time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
He was a mortgage broker.
So nobody had leverage. And so I imagine everybody backstage was just sort of like, ooh, yeah, what do you want me to do? Okay,
Sure.
I'll do it.
Sure.
All right, I got it.
Bleed all over the ring? Sure.
Sure, why not? Yeah, absolutely.
This era was defined by a lot of bloody matches and a lot of lecherous events.
Yeah, it was actually, I mean, looking back on it, there's a lot of good stuff going on in the ruthless aggression era. You had the ascendance of Randy Orton, Brock Lesnar, Edge. His heel work was immaculate then.
Batista, John Cena, of course.
And, of course, John Cena. And then, Kurt Angle was putting in some amazing work during this time as well. It's just funny that it started off by Vince McMahon essentially looking around and saying, man, nobody's really going out. He noticed that nobody was sneaking into his office
And politicking to be inserted in the main event of Wrestle 15 like Triple H was doing.
This guy,
back in
he's
99.
used to guys like Hogan saying, hey, brother, I know you like this Brett kid, but he's really short, really small. Don't think it's real, okay? So how about this, brother? Brett loses to Yokozuna. Clean? I don't care. This is the important part. Are you listening? Hogan comes down. Brother, leg drop. I win the title.
It's great, Hulk.
So he's used to guys like Hogan, like Triple H, of course,
Yeah.
Hey, Dad.
Yeah.
Politicking.
Of course, this is Triple H's reign of terror.
Yeah.
Down during the ruthless aggression era.
Yeah, true. Because, again, nobody's out there grabbing that brass ring.
Yeah.
And Triple H is like, I'm used to being here with a bunch of sharks. I'm just going to take what I want. Getting in everybody's ear.
I know.
Yeah, no, totally.
You have a note here about tad less salaciousness. It's interesting. Ruthless aggression with both less and more salacious.
Right. Yeah.
Because as I mentioned earlier, we had a lot more lecherous events, which is... Ugh.
We had a live sex show, for one thing. But I feel like...
Because Vince inserted himself more front and center as this kind of creepy guy.
Yeah.
Which is horribly off-putting.
Yeah.
They were still doing a lot of the bikini stuff, mud wrestling stuff. The women's division, the emphasis was less on wrestling and more kind of the salacious stuff. I mean, you still had Trish and Lita doing some good stuff.
Well, okay,
during this time, but then we, especially towards the tail end of this, you had like the Diva search happening and stuff like that.
So the tail end, you had like the Diva search where they were going after like models and stuff.
Yeah.
But during this time, you had guys like Molly Holly, like Jacqueline.
Oh yeah, and you had Trish, you had Lita, you had Victoria. They were all good wrestlers.
They were all good wrestlers. So I think my point about that was like, if you look back during the Attitude Era, I mean, you had like Lita
and Jacqueline,
but Jacqueline was brought in to help Trish Stratus.
No, Jacqueline's around before that.
Who am I thinking of?
No, Jacqueline, I think when Trish was brought in, they put Jacqueline with her.
Okay.
But
like you had stuff like Sable, for example.
Yeah.
With like the hands on the boobs thing, right? At this time, like you had more wrestling in the women's division.
You
But then
did.
they started to pivot.
Yeah.
It felt. I'm trying to think what the difference was in the women's division because I did feel like
I think it was just Vince inserted himself more into the women's division scene by being a creep.
Yeah.
That's the major difference.
Yeah.
Because I can't remember. He was too, involved with the Austin stuff during the Attitude Era. And he really wasn't that involved with interacting with the women's division a whole lot. But Ruthless Aggression, it seemed like every episode of Raw, there was somebody from the women's division had to go in his office.
Yeah.
And it was, ugh.
Yeah, it was pretty gross.
It was gross.
Yeah.
That's the major difference, it feels like.
It was just Vince's gross playground.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Fair enough.
So in that sense, it was more salacious.
Right.
But then I understand your point. Like, especially early on in this particular era, it seemed like there was more emphasis on the quality of the in-ring product for the women's division.
Maybe I'll put it this way. Because I'm honestly trying to analyze this right now. I feel like during the Attitude Era, the titillation, if you will, was aimed towards the audience. Hey, look what we got going on in the ring.
And the Ruthless Aggression, the titillation was aimed towards Vince.
Right.
Yeah.
It was sort of a means to just gross us out on Vince.
Mm-hmm.
Because none of it was like, oh, wow, look what we get to enjoy. It was like, ugh, I don't want to see a Vince porn.
Yeah.
That's gross.
Yeah.
So that's weird, right?
I know.
That's a little
That's
weird.
why it's like more and less salacious at the same time.
But the Ruthless Aggression era, what was it, 2004, 2006 that we saw Trish versus Lita in the main event? Mm-hmm. So, like, Trish was actually coming to run as a really good wrestler.
Yeah.
We had stuff like Mickie James
Yeah.
coming around. So, like, I feel like they were getting some storylines. But then, yeah, towards the tail end, we had, like, the Diva Search thing.
Yeah. It was a weird mix of like, pretty accomplished women's wrestlers and then the kind of the divas they were bringing in.
Yeah. That was weird.
And then they kind of went all in on the diva stuff later on.
Mm-hmm. Wonky era. Number 2. Rockin' Wrestling. Look at that. Those are real pro wrestlers right there, man.
Well, there's one real pro wrestler.
Hogan and Savage.
There's Hogan, and then there's a real pro wrestler in that picture.
Oh, man. Can you dig it? Oh, yeah.
Macho Man's one of the best.
He was one of the best, man. He was great. So anyways, basically, Vince went around the territories, and everybody said, hey, you know what, Vince? We think you should go national. Here, take all of our best stuff, and we're going to fold. That's how it happened, right?
Well, there's money involved, but kind of, yeah.
No, I think what happened was Vince said, I'm going to go national. I'm going to steal all the best talent. And then he did that.
Yeah.
And then everybody folded.
Well, then he bought Jim Crockett's Promotions time slot on TBS.
Yeah. What do they call that? The Saturday
Black
night?
Saturday.
Black Saturday?
I think, yeah.
Something like that.
Where he showed up on TBS and announced that WWS product was going to be airing there.
So most of y'all probably know the story. Prior to the rock and wrestling era, there were territories. It was the territories.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody all these people had carved out various parts of the country, and they would just sort of stick to those markets. With the dawn of cable TV, it was possible now to get a national deal, which Vince McMahon...
I'm sorry. It was Georgia Championship Wrestling, the time slot.
Oh, okay. So Vince McMahon went after all that stuff, and he basically just started poaching talent, all the top talent from everywhere, like Hulk Hogan, Mean Gene, both came from AWA, and so on and so forth.
Well, I think there's talents from all over the country. I think like JYD came from New Orleans territory.
Okay, yeah.
He came from Florida. Piper came from like the Pacific Northwest. He was wrestling up in Portland.
Right.
Gosh, who else? Who were some other major names?
Where did Savage come from? Did Savage come from?
I think he's the Midwest.
Okay, yeah.
And then who are the major names?
Slaughter. Slaughter came from...
he was in AWA a lot.
Okay, yeah.
I believe. But where did King Kong Bundy come from? I know, I can't remember. Probably the South.
You think it was the South?
Maybe, yeah.
I don't know. In any event, he started poaching territories, and they all had to close shop because WWF became a national force.
Well, it was some of them had to close their doors, and then you had like AWA who tried to keep going on. They had a TV deal with ESPN for a little bit. They moved their operations, their TV tapings from Minneapolis to Vegas. We used to tape at the Showboat Casino there. But that didn't last very long.
Yeah, but the bottom line is,
they were on the way
he
out.
Basically put everybody out of business. That's
Yeah.
how it went down. And he sort of rebranded. He rebooted all around Hulk Hogan. When did Hogan won the title off of the Sheik in '85? It was after his standout performance as Thunder Lips in Rocky III. Yep. And I think he spent some time in New Japan, came back over, and Vince grabbed him and said, "We're going to put the title on you." And Hogan was like, "Oh, so if I have the title, I make a lot of money, right?" And Vince was like, "Yeah." And Hogan, that was the biggest lesson for Hulk Hogan, was if you have a title, you have money. History was made. I mean, it was the golden era for professional wrestling. It sort of firmly put them on the map as being synonymous with professional wrestling. I mean, all I knew when I was a kid was Hulk Hogan and the WWF. I had no idea that wrestling existed anywhere else until I don't know. I mean, college, when I started paying attention, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense that wrestling existed in other places.
Yeah.
But I never knew.
Oh, I didn't really know either. I mean, for me, WWF was wrestling.
I didn't know that, WCW, I was like, oh, WCW. If you had asked me back in 1997, hey, how far back did WCW go? I'd probably say, I don't know.
When Scott Hall showed up on Nitro.
When Lex Luger showed up at the
Mall of America.
The Great Steak Escape or whatever it's called.
Yeah, at Sbarro.
At Sbarro's, exactly. I miss Sbarro's.
Man, they had great Strombolis there, man.
I like Sbarro's.
They were so good.
Yeah, it was good stuff. I don't think they're around anymore.
That's a bummer.
I know. So, I mean, obviously, Hogan dominated everything. They had cartoon, licensing, toys.
Everything.
Everything. They had everything. And then it fizzled out in 1993 and made way for the new generation.
New generation.
The new generation. So none of that was, everybody knows all that stuff. Now the voice of the Hogan era is passed away, man. Mean Gene.
I know.
What a drag. What a bummer.
A legend.
But yeah, so that was probably one of the big, if not the biggest, sort of creative renaissance for WWF. And certainly it allowed them to continue on and creatively change in 1997. We're going to take a look at that one right now. Number one. The Attitude Era. So there are varying points and moments that you can look at and say, this is when the Attitude Era began. One of the more interesting ideas about when it actually began, I felt, was Vince Russo, apparently in his book. I just got this off Wikipedia. Vince Russo said that he felt that the creation of Goldust was a big symbol for the beginning of the Attitude Era.
That goes way back.
Because it sort of signaled the direction that they would be heading into.
Yeah, a precursor.
Yeah, exactly. This is sort of where we're going to be headed. This is something we're willing to do. This is something we're interested in exploring. So you have that. Obviously, King of the Ring 96 gave birth to the Austin 316 catchphrase. I mean, even the creation of, when did Stone Cold Steve Austin debut and the Ringmaster
had to
died?
Be some point in 96.
96. Of course, Austin's turn at Mania with Bret Hart, his big
Mania
match 13, right there.
Yeah.
You could
Early
look at
97.
that. You could look at maybe the creation of DX as possibly,
again in 97, yeah,
or Survivor Series 97.
For me, it really feels like Survivor Series 97, the aftermath, when Vince really fully embodied the Mr. McMahon character.
I kind of agree with that too.
He exploited what happened the previous night for the benefit of the company. Cut that Brett screwed Brett promo.
Well, several things happened with Survivor Series 97, and exactly that's correct. You had Vince McMahon had to choose between one of two things. Is he going to be sort of honorable and was he going to go with Bret Hart? Was he going to show the loyalty to Bret Hart, even though Bret was making kind of unrealistic demands as it pertains to dropping that title, or was he going to ride hard with DX and create this Mr. McMahon character? And that's what happened. Bret Hart, the new generation, was now the old generation. He was ushered away.
Yeah.
And the truly new generation, D-Generation X, guys who are growing around showing off their private areas. Stone Cold Steve Austin, guys who just, didn't give an F.
Yeah.
That was he going to roll with that? And that's what he rolled with. That's what he did.
Yep.
And so I think that Survivor Series 97 could probably be pointed at as, okay, this is where they're going.
I think that's really the turning point where they were all in, because even about 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, Vince, in the least Attitude Era promo possible, said, we're going to start the Attitude Era. We won't see cartoonish characters and over-the-top gimmicks anymore. Which wasn't exactly true.
Where's the...
Because you did see that going forward.
The funny thing is that promo it's so cringy. Attitude Era promo transcript. I want to look at this thing. It looks like something... It looks like something that you'd see in like a board meeting somewhere.
Yeah, because he's got he's standing in front of a background that's lit, so it looks like it's a gradient.
It looks like
it's like a grayscale gradient.
It looks like a Sears photo
kind of
studio.
yeah, but a little more moody lighting.
Yeah, so he walks into frame and says, "It has been said that anything can happen here in the World Wrestling Federation." He never goes into gruff Vince. That sort of wasn't a thing yet.
Not consistently.
Not consistent. I mean, he would do that on commentary. So, look at that move.
Yeah. What a maneuver.
What a maneuver. But he was all in corporate Vince talk here. It has been said that anything can happen here in the World Wrestling Federation, but now more than ever, truer words have never been spoken. This is a conscious effort on our part to open the creative envelope, so to speak, in order to entertain you in a more contemporary manner. Like, who uses the word contemporary? That's terrible. He continues, even though we call ourselves sports entertainment because of the athleticism involved, the key word in that phrase is entertainment. The WWF extends far beyond the strict confines of sport. And he just goes on. He talks about...
He name drops King of the Hill, Seinfeld.
In the days of our lives, he talks about music videos on MTV as influences for the WWF.
The line here is...
We in the WWF think that you, the audience, are quite frankly tired of having your intelligence insulted. That line itself insults our intelligence. Like, why is he saying this stuff? There's no need for this.
Do it. You don't need to drop
Just
a manifesto.
do it, and it goes on and on.
Where's he goes talking about over-the-top characters and stuff?
He says, we also think that you're tired of the same old simplistic theory of good guys versus bad guys. Surely the era of the superhero urge you to say your prayers and take your vitamins is definitely passé. Oh my God, this is so bad. This was in December of 1997. It was on the eve of, Austin winning the Rumble, going on to take that title off of Shawn Michaels. But it's so unnecessary.
Raw and the Warzone are definitely cure for the comment show.
Yeah, that's how he punctuates it. He says, I'm happy to say this new vibrant creative direction has resulted in a huge increase in television viewership. Well, it was so low. It was such in the trash that anything would have
any improvement would be seen as a huge improvement.
But of course, it was the attitude. I mean, what he really should have said here was, because there's like a little bit here that maybe this was his main intention, to warn parents that, hey, we're going to be showing you like some really salacious stuff. I mean, dude, I'll never forget watching at Big Jeff's house Monday Night Raw, and I swear to you, my memory might be completely shot, but there was a cameraman who went like right up Terry Runnels' dress while she was climbing the steps. And I was like, oh, I shouldn't have seen that, what I just saw. Like, what he really should have said is, parents, we're going to be showing your kids stuff that they shouldn't be seeing. So just put them to bed. Go watch WCW. And then on Saturday mornings, you can watch the recap show where we're not going to show you any of the nasty stuff.
Yeah.
That's what he should have been doing. But it's just really wonky promo. But the Attitude Era. I mean, it's very, 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 very fondly remembered.
Yes.
Because there was a lot of good stuff, a lot of great characters, a lot of like supremely memorable moments.
Yeah.
The WWE knows this, and they would go back to it endlessly. They still do go back to it endlessly. There was also a lot of very cringeworthy stuff going on.
Oh, yeah.
But, I mean, that's all in hindsight. So, yeah, the Attitude Era, definitely the biggest and, by the way, most profitable until probably today, to be honest with you. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure, like, if you take inflation into account and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, the TV deals back then weren't worth nearly what they are now.
Right, exactly.
So, no, I'd say right now it's probably the most profitable period, but I wonder in terms of profit margin was the most profitable.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, you had back then, man, Stone Cold's making like $12 million a year.
You saw a ton of merch.
Tons of merch.
Biggest
draw
I don't think we've
ever.
seen anybody really since since that has sold the level of merch that Stone Cold has. I mean, Cena's regularly a top merch seller, but I don't know if it even compares what Stone Cold was moving back in the day.
I have no idea, but I don't know. I mean, if you again, you know, you look at ratings as an enthusiasm thing.
Oh yeah,
through the roof.
Yeah.
And I understand that people consume their media in a different way these days, but like, you know, to get like what was like an 8.1 during that Rock Mankind segment, the This Is Your Life thing.
It's insane.
That's insane. That is obscene.
That's what network shows do these days.
Like highly rated network shows do these days. I know. So yeah, of course, obviously the Attitude Era, especially coming off that stinky New Generation garbage, the Attitude Era, the number one creative renaissance reboot for the WWE. Thanks for watching. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much.
And until next time, we'll talk to you guys later.
Goodbye.
Be a part of Going In Raw today at patreon.com/Steve and Larson. Starting at $1 a month, you can enjoy Going In Raw ad-free, gain access to the daily 30-minute Going In Raw post show, exclusive merchandise, and so much more. Support Going In Raw today. Click the link in the description.